It's that flow, no, she my flow. Yeah, 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 yeah. It's that
The Great Barrier Reef, a catastrophe laid bare. I can't even tell you how bad I smelled after the dive. The smell of millions of rotting animals. Vevers is a former advertising executive and is now the chief executive of the Ocean Agency, a not-for-profit company he founded to raise awareness of environmental problems. After diving for 30 years in his spare time, he was compelled to combine his work and hobby when he was struck by the calamities faced by oceans around the world. Chief among them was coral bleaching, caused by climate change. His job these days is rather morbid. He travels the world documenting dead and dying coral reefs, sometimes gathering photographs just ahead of their death, too. With the world now in the midst of the longest and probably worst global coral bleaching event in history, it's boom time for Vevers. Even with all that experience, he'd never seen anything like the devastation he saw last month around Lizard Island and the northern third of Australia's spectacular Great Barrier Reef. http://www.theguardian.com/environment/gallery/2016/June/07/coral graveyard. The aftermath of bleaching on the Great Barrier Reef in pictures. As part of a project documenting the global bleaching event, he had surveyed Lizard Island, which sits about 90 kilometers north of Cooktown in far north Queensland, when it was in full glorious health, then just as it started bleaching this year, then finally a few weeks after the bleaching began. It was one of the most disgusting sights I've ever seen, he says. The hard corals were dead and covered in algae, looking like they've been dead for years. The soft corals were still dying and the flesh of the animals was decomposing and dripping off the reef structure. It's the sort of description that would be hard to believe, if it wasn't captured in photographs. In images shared exclusively with The Guardian, the catastrophic nature of the current mass bleaching event on previously pristine parts of the Great Barrier Reef can now be revealed. Once that happens, it can take a decade for the coral to recover, and even then that recovery depends on the reef not being hit by other stressors such as water pollution. Vevers' images show how the once brilliant coral first turned white and then became covered in seaweed. While the hard corals are still holding their structure under the seaweed blanket, the soft corals are dying, dripping off the dead coral skeletons. The thick seaweed is a sign of extreme ecosystem meltdown. Fish can no longer use the coral structure as shelter blocked by the plants, and before long the coral structures themselves are likely to collapse, leaving little chance of full recovery within the next 10 years. When the coral dies, the entire ecosystem around it transforms. Fish that feed on the coral, use it as shelter, or nibble on the algae that grows among it die or move away. The bigger fish that feed on those fish disappear too. But the cascading effects don't stop there. Birds that eat fish lose their energy source, and island plants that thrive on bird droppings can be depleted. And, of course, people who rely on reefs for food, income or shelter from waves. Some 500 million people worldwide lose their vital resource. Justin Marshall, a biologist at the University of Queensland who spends a lot of his time studying the reef ecosystem around Lizard Island, says, what happens is the colony dies, the polyps disintegrate. The algae use that as fertilizer and grow very quickly over the coral head. And at that point it's doomed. It's going to break up. It's like a forest where plants compete for light. On the reef you've got this continuous competition between the seaweed and the coral. And, in the conditions we've got at the moment, the seaweed tends to win because it's warm and it's got lots of rotting stuff around to fertilize it. Marshall says the thing that struck him about the bleaching event this year was not just the severity but the rapidity of the death. I was just blown away by that. Once the seaweed has taken hold, and the structure of the reef is broken up and lost, studies have shown that recovery is slower. Reefs can be lost forever.